I'm Luke, and welcome to another episode of Building Up. And today I have a very important guest, my mom. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm
Good
excited.
to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you.
Yeah.
So, can you just start with telling us a little bit of like your background, upbringing, just kind of an overview?
Okay. Well, I was actually born back east in Massachusetts, so my background is pretty solid New England, and we moved to California when I was about 6. And you could take all of us out of the New England, but you didn't take the New England out of my parents. So that's still a strong, thing, influence. And come from a small family, no brothers or sisters.
Only child.
Yep, only one. Supposedly very spoiled, but I really thought my parents invented this saying that children should be seen and not heard. So I don't think I got that part of it.
The spoiled part?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we moved to California. So I feel like a native Californian because it's pretty much my whole life.
Yeah, I've always thought of you as native, but
Yeah.
you moved to California when you were 6. What part of California?
Let's see. The first part of California we moved to was near Santa Barbara. Well,
Okay.
no, that's not right. We moved to Bellflower, and my stepdad had a job in Long Beach
Oh,
for a manufacturing company, and they were used to a small town. So a distant cousin of my stepdad had lived in Manhattan Beach up in the LA area. We lived in Bellflower. And so they moved up to Santa Barbara when his job transferred him up there. So we went up there to visit for a weekend, and my parents were just like, wow, this is the place.
they loved it.
They loved it. So
You-
as soon as school was out, I think that was my 3rd grade year, we up and moved.
To Santa Barbara.
To Santa Barbara.
Do you remember approximately like what year?
Yeah, it was just days before my 9th birthday, so it was 1957.
1957. Okay.
Yeah.
And so now you're the new kid in town.
Yep. And we lived in now it'd be a mobile home, but back then, a lot of people who moved around for work lived in trailers.
Hmm.
I mean, people have better vacation trailers than the one we lived in, but it was fine.
So you lived in a trailer when you first moved to Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
At what point did they buy a house?
I
You guys-
think when I was in 7th grade, they found a house to rent with an option to buy.
Mhm.
And so it had been a part of the Marine base that's now the campus of the University of California at Santa Barbara.
Oh, wow.
Part of it became that Marine base, part of it became the university, and part of it is now the airport.
Okay.
So,
Wow. So Santa Barbara in 1957 had to have felt a lot different.
oh, for sure. I mean, we actually ended up living in Goleta, which is closer to the university. It's about 9 or 10 miles out of downtown Santa Barbara. And they had just paved the side streets the year before we moved there. So
So it was dirt roads.
it was just the main road
Main road. Okay.
through there, which was 101.
Hmm.
And at that time, it wasn't a freeway. So, yeah, it was a lot different. But we loved it. We thought it was the greatest because we
Yeah.
had spent 3 years living in the city
Hmm.
in LA County in
Yeah.
Bellflower. And so Santa Barbara was it was a great place to grow up.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Just kind of small town feel still, and
Yeah. It still had that small town rural feel.
Mhm.
A lot of avocado groves, a lot of lemon and citrus, orange, walnuts. In fact, there was a walnut grove right behind where we lived, and there was a great big tomato field. My friends and I used to walk home from elementary school, and they told us, you can pick all the tomatoes you want and take them home as long as they're not green. You can take all the ripe ones. And so
nice.
we did.
Yeah.
We carried salt shakers in our purses, and we'd have a little in-hand tomato snack
That's
on
funny.
the way home.
So you finished growing up there? You go to high school in Santa Barbara?
Yes, yeah. In fact, when we moved to Goleta, um, the elementary school that I went to was right next to that, where the trailer park was.
Okay.
And today it's a community center, and there's a hotel. There's a Hampton Inn, I think it is, which
Now?
is now there.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so I went to Goleta Elementary School, and then La Colina Junior High, and San Marcos High School, which was interesting because everybody always got it mixed up with San Marcos High School that's here in San Diego County.
Oh, really? Being that far apart, they still got confused?
Yep, they did, because they would, order supplies for, like, I think it was biology class, and they would send them to San Marcos in San Diego County and say, well, kids, we can't dissect the frogs today.
They went to the wrong San
They went to the
Marcos.
wrong San Marcos.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So what kind of hobbies were you into in high school? What did you do any activities in high school?
For a while, when I was younger, when I was about 10,
Mm-hmm.
I was in 4-H, and I took sewing and cooking. And before that, I had been in brownies, but I never got to Girl Scouts. I went to 4-H before going from brownies to full Girl Scout.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, hobbies. So sewing, I did a lot of sewing.
Okay.
And I read a lot because the library was right there, and they had summer reading programs, and not so much TV. We had one TV channel.
One?
One.
In the
No cable,
okay.
no streaming, none of that. Just one. It was one of those deals where on a good day you could get an LA channel because it was about 100 miles to LA.
Mm-hmm.
But you had to have somebody go out, and they always joke about having someone go out and turn the antenna.
Yeah.
It was like that.
To pick up another
Yeah.
channel. Okay.
Oh, stop right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in high school, so you finish high school, and where do you go from there?
I went to Santa Barbara City College and took some classes. I actually met your dad
All right.
in high school.
Okay.
And maybe it might have been even in junior high, because junior high at our time was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. So 9th was not yet high school.
Oh, okay.
And so I met him there, but we didn't start to go out until high school.
Got
He
it.
had another girlfriend.
Oh.
So,
Another girlfriend.
yeah,
Okay.
you had to wait for that to run its course.
Uh-huh.
And then we started dating. And after graduation, I think Dad enlisted in the Army because Vietnam was ramping up.
Yeah, so that would have been right around what year?
We graduated in 1966.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So right as it's ramping up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he signs up, and you guys are dating, or?
Yeah, we were dating. We got engaged before he left
Mm-hmm.
to go into basic training. And so I didn't go to school quite yet. I went to work for the city building department
Oh, wow.
in Santa Barbara as a secretary.
In the building department.
Yeah.
Was it hard to get permits back then?
I don't think so.
No, I can't imagine.
But Santa Barbara was pretty restrictive. I mean, they were pretty picky about how things looked. And as a secretary there, I was also the secretary for the Architectural Board of Review that met at City Hall.
Okay.
And they would review plans and approve or disapprove or say, this doesn't fit the character of the area where you want to build, so we need you to make some changes.
So they were real sticklers about the aesthetic.
They were, very much.
And so that all had to get approved, because there is a pretty, even still today, there's a pretty continuous feel to the architecture up there.
There is, and they always had an area called El Pueblo Viejo, I think they called it. It was
Okay.
a certain part of the city, and it was very much that Spanish-influenced architecture.
Mm-hmm.
When you go there today and you see the courthouse and some of the buildings downtown. They're very much in that style.
Yeah, and that's intentional. They wanted to keep
Yes.
everything to look like that.
Right. In
Okay.
fact, when my folks went to build a business, my stepdad went to start his own business called Central Machine and Welding, which I think is still there. But
The
he had
business
kind
is?
of, yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow.
He sold it and when he retired, but he had a hard time getting his plans through the ARB,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they wanted more arches, more Spanish, even though this was a light industrial area of the city.
Wow. So he was building his commercial building?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He bought the property
Mm-hmm.
and built it out and made a real successful business out of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And he did that until he retired.
Uh-huh.
And then he sold it, and you think it might still be there.
I think it might.
That's pretty incredible. I did not know that he built his building, and I didn't know he sold his business. I thought maybe he just shut it down. But,
Yeah.
you know, to grow something to the point where you can sell it, I mean, that's a pretty successful place to get.
It is. Yeah. And he used to do a lot of work for the oil rigs offshore.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of
Until-
drilling up there, right?
And what?
There's a lot of drilling up there.
There was at the time, and now they're offshore, and it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, really, Earth Day started in Santa Barbara after that oil spill,
Oh, really?
which happened like the day after our first wedding anniversary, which was in January of 1968.
Okay.
And so the oil spill was January of 69, and he left for Vietnam the day after.
Dad did.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. After the first Earth Day ever?
Yeah. Well, I don't think they had started Earth Day yet.
Okay.
They had started an organization called GOO, which stood for Get Oil Out.
Well, I remember, going up there as a kid, and you'd get tar on your feet from walking on the beach.
Oh, yeah. And that was forever. That happened to me as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, so you took a little paint thinner with you or,
Yeah.
you know, and so clean off your feet before you get back in the house.
Is that from the drilling, or is that just how?
No, there's
Concentrated.
natural oil seepage
Oh, wow.
offshore, and that's what got all the companies drilling.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I, for some reason, had thought that it was from something they did. From like
No.
okay.
No, it was a natural thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are dating. You're working in the building department. He's getting ready to go to Vietnam. Now you're engaged,
Uh-huh.
and then you get married. What year?
January 27th, 1968. So we're coming up on 57 years.
Wow, 57 years.
Yep.
In a few weeks here.
Yeah,
Or
next
about a
month.
month. Yep.
Next month.
So you get married after he goes to Vietnam or before?
Before.
So he hasn't shipped out yet.
No. He had just finished OCS, Officer Candidate School, and he came back into town. He was just commissioned about 3 or 4 days before we got married. He just got his commission as a second lieutenant.
Wow.
And then we went to beautiful Fort Irwin, California. That was our first place, which is, it shares a boundary with Death Valley National
Oh,
Monument. It's out in
gosh.
the desert. And we called it the longest cul-de-sac because basically you hang a left at Barstow and go for 38 miles, and then the road dead ends.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Just nothing out there.
no, it had just been elevated to a fort. It had been Camp Irwin,
Okay.
and it had just been elevated to a fort. And they had some pretty decent housing. We were just the two of us rattling around in this 3-bedroom house,
Oh wow.
you know.
So that was after he got commissioned.
Uh-huh.
And so do you live there alone then when he goes to Vietnam?
No, he got orders to Vietnam. We were there from basically February of 1968 until December of 1968. And he had received his orders to Vietnam, and then we went on leave to Santa Barbara. So I moved back in with my parents
Okay.
when he deployed.
Gotcha. And are you working at this time? Are you going to school?
I went to school.
Because you were 19 when
Yeah,
you,
we were 19 when we got married.
I think it runs in the family.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. So you were going to school.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the deal was that I would go to school, he would come back from Vietnam, and he would go to school on the
Okay.
GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I would work and then put him through school.
So you worked him through college
Yep.
after he came back.
After he came back from Vietnam.
So he's gone for how long?
He was gone from January of 1969 to January of 1970.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he was there for almost a year.
Any breaks?
Yeah. In August of 1969, he got a week to go on R&R, and we met in Hawaii
Oh, wow.
and spent a week.
So does the military fly you out, or do you have to find your way to?
You have to find your way, but you get discounts, military discounts.
Yeah.
So we stayed at the Hilton Hawaiian Village in the Rainbow Tower when it was brand new. And I think it was like, I was sort of like, what? We only get $5 off, because
Yeah.
the room was $38 full price.
Oh, wow.
Now you couldn't touch it for probably more than $438.
Right,
You
right.
know.
So he gets plucked out of Vietnam, dropped off in Hawaii for a week.
I know. Is that bizarre? That they take you out of war,
Uh-huh.
put you in paradise for a week,
Uh-huh.
and then send you back.
That's like shocking to the system.
Yeah,
And you hadn't seen each other in 6 months.
right.
So your first time seeing it is, yeah, for the week out there in Hawaii.
Uh-huh.
And then, so you're going to school still,
Uh-huh.
living at home. And so he comes back and he's in the service still, though, after. Now he's home, but he's still in the Army, right?
No, he got out of the Army when he came back to the States. So they processed him out
Okay.
as soon as he was back.
Okay.
And so when he got back, I had enrolled him in school at Santa Barbara City College
Mm-hmm.
to do his, what do they call it? Lower division.
Oh, yeah. Like kind of
stuff.
his GE stuff. And
Right.
okay.
Yeah. And then when he was done with that, we actually overlapped. We went to school together for one semester.
Oh, how funny.
And then I went to work for the city of Santa Barbara
Got it.
in the building department.
Okay. So at what point do you guys make your way down to San Diego?
He finishes his 2 years of junior college and transfers to San Diego State.
Oh, wow. So he came down here for school.
Yep,
You guys did.
we did. And we stayed.
And you stayed. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you have to find work now in San Diego.
right. And I had written letters. I actually ended up working at a law firm in Santa Barbara. And when I knew we were getting close to moving to San Diego, I had written a lot of law firms
Mm-hmm.
and set up some interviews. So when we got down here, I had some interviews. And by the time we moved, I had been hired
Oh, wow.
at a firm here in downtown San Diego.
Okay. So you moved to a job. He's going to school,
Yep.
freeloading off of you. No. You're working him through college and the Army's paying for it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was the plan.
Yes.
Okay. So he ends up graduating.
He
And-
graduated in August of 73.
Okay. And immediately goes to work.
Yep. He got his real estate broker's license
Mm-hmm.
and he went to work for a real estate firm as a salesperson.
Okay.
So tough times though, because that was the first oil embargo
Mm-hmm.
in 1973. And, all the cars were gas guzzlers and
Yeah.
lines around the gas station.
Oh, yeah. Gas lines like crazy back then,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of a tricky time to be trying to get on your feet.
Right. And, driving all over town to show clients property. And so he thought, you know what, this isn't really doing us very well. I got to find something else. And that's when he went into banking.
Oh, okay. So there's no gap in between school and
No,
Okay.
no.
Um,
Although when he finished college in August of '73, we took a trip. We
okay.
borrowed his dad's Volkswagen camper,
Mm-hmm.
and we went across country. And we left the day after Uncle Dave and Aunt Ramey got married, and we didn't come back until December of that year. So we were gone from basically September to December.
Oh, wow.
And we lived at the farm that Aunt Karen's family had
Okay.
in New Jersey. And he worked on a farm, picking apples 3 days a week, and then we would take side trips the rest of the week, and we'd go to Pennsylvania Dutch country, and we went to visit my relatives on Cape Cod, and
Oh, nice.
stuff like that. Went to New York City.
Mm-hmm.
His Aunt Pauline and Uncle Al lived in Queens,
Oh, wow.
so we got to jump on the subway and get lost a lot.
That's pretty cool. I seem to recall hearing something on that trip. Was that the trip that he got you to do a jump?
Actually, that was after we had moved to San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he used to go down and do sport parachuting down at Otay.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I'm hanging out here doing nothing. Let me try this.
So you figure you'd jump out of an airplane.
Yeah,
So you did a jump or?
I did 2 static line jumps.
Okay.
And I figured, okay,
That's
Tech-
enough. All done.
been there, done
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That's amazing. I remember hearing about that and just thinking, yeah, that's not something I would have guessed, but that's pretty cool. So after this trip, then he comes back, jumps into the real estate, is struggling through that,
Yeah,
and ends up in banking.
right.
So at what point do you guys decide, because you're kind of in an interesting time. He's made it, gone through the Vietnam experience. You worked him through college. You've gone through college. Have you finished your 2-year or 4-year at this
Just
point?
2.
And it was in,
It was in Santa Barbara.
okay.
I didn't actually, I think I did 1 semester at San Diego State.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was, we were struggling through the real estate in 1973, 74 during that time. And so I decided to go back to work so that he could finish school.
Doing paralegal stuff again, or?
I worked in a law firm
Mhm.
as a secretary.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. At what point because I know you have your paralegal degree, right?
Right. That was later
Okay.
because I had been out, you guys had started having a family.
Okay.
And so at some point I thought, well, I should go back to work. I mean, we could use another income for sure with our family. And so I thought maybe getting a paralegal certificate would substitute for the experience that I hadn't had
Okay.
while I was being mom.
Yeah. So after he gets into banking, then you guys decide that's the time you're going to start a family.
Right.
And you'd been married for how long at that point?
When Sarah was born, we had been married 8 years.
8 years you guys waited.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, the decision to start a family, I know, is always it's kind of an interesting one because you don't know what you don't know and you're getting into, uncharted territory. Did you always know that you wanted to have a family and a certain size, or?
Yeah, we did. All I knew was that I didn't want to have an only child
Uh-huh.
because I had been one, So I knew, and Dad came from a family of 3 boys. And that was before Ramey joined the family. And so he wanted 3.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up with 4.
Yeah. 2 and 2.
Right.
Okay. But I mean, being a mom of a family of that size is a pretty full-time job. So you're not working during
No.
that period.
Well, for a while, I did, typed deposition transcripts for a court reporting firm at home.
Okay.
And so that was something that I could do at home and still be mom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was before computers came along. Once computers came along, that job went away,
Oh, wow.
actually, because the court reporters could do that themselves.
Yeah.
They could, input all of their reporting on a computer, and then they could type it up themselves.
So when you were doing transcription, it was on a typewriter?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's literally gone the second computers come on the scene.
Right.
Wow. So that's kind of a game changer. But for the time being, it was a way you could work from home.
Yes.
And then after that,
Dad picked up a few things, like for the bank, he signed people up for pool loans for swimming pools. And he would get, so much pay for, each person that signed up and took out a loan.
yeah.
And so that brought us a little extra income every month.
Okay.
And then I really, there wasn't much else for me to do.
Yeah.
So,
Well, a family of, basically you're running a household for 6.
right.
And all through the late 70s and 80s,
Mm-hmm.
through the 90s.
Right.
So stuff's changing in the workplace pretty quickly,
Very quickly, yeah.
and you're just focused on making a home.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to try and re-enter the workforce after such a gap? It's huge.
Yeah, it's tricky because your skills don't keep up. Technology is running along ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it challenging to find something.
Yeah.
So that's why I went back and got the paralegal degree. And then I did temporary work.
Okay.
So I figured, well, I can still type.
Yeah.
And I took some courses to learn some word processing and ended up doing that.
Okay. So you get your paralegal degree. Is that a 4-year? Or
No,
is that
it's
a 2-year?
2.
Okay. And then at some point you decide you're going to essentially re-career for the third time, because now you're not a mom, being a full-time mom at home or homemaker. Your kids are older. You're doing paralegal, and then what?
And then I was doing temporary secretarial work, like
Okay.
also doing word processing. I was getting some computer skills myself
Yeah.
and using community resources to do that.
Yeah.
And they had courses like I took a Microsoft Word class at Cuyamaca College.
Yeah.
And there's a community employment center, and they have Microsoft courses where you could learn different, like word processing and all of the what's the one, you could learn PowerPoint.
So this is all new stuff when you're
Brand new.
coming back into it.
Yep.
So is the paralegal the only degree you got then, or are there other?
Well, no, that was the only degree I had up until then. I didn't go back and finish my 4-year degree until later on.
Oh, okay.
At my goal at that point was to finish my college degree before any of my kids did.
Okay. So you were going back. I know that so much happens during that lifetime of raising kids, and such a kind of a learning curve in that realm, but then also like the professional realm, which I never really got the impression that you were trying to have a career.
No.
But you have all this experience. You love learning, and it seemed like there was some things that you wanted to do for you, like going back and getting your 4-year.
Right.
And tell us about your experience getting your nursing degree.
Well, let's see. When did I do that? I probably signed up for that not long after we built our house out in Alpine on Running Mare Lane. And Dad had come back. He cut his finger and needed some stitches. And he said, well, they said you did such a good job of bandaging me up that, you could be a nurse. And I said, well, funny you should say that because I just signed up to take some prerequisite courses so I could get into nursing school.
Oh, wow.
So that was in 2005. I started taking the prerequisites, and I did it crazy. I wouldn't do it the same again. I took microbiology, anatomy, and physiology all in the same semester.
Oh, my word.
So that was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And then once I got finished, I had like almost a 2-year wait to get into nursing school.
Really? Were they that backed up?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if it's still like that because I've heard that they're trying to kind of attract people now because it's not as...
Yeah, I think the pendulum on that has swung a little
Okay.
bit back in that direction.
Yeah.
People, they used to just crank as many people out as they could, and they didn't have enough to fill the demand.
Yeah.
So people who came out of nursing school they could write their own ticket
Yeah.
and do whatever and
But it
find
wasn't
a
like
job.
that when you were...
No, they were contracting again. It was that 2008, 2009 economic downturn.
Okay.
And so everybody was getting lean and mean.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard to find jobs.
So there's a 2-year wait, and then you get basically called up for it, or how does that work?
They wrote me a letter and said, take this placement test and start school in the fall.
Wow.
So August of 2007, I started nursing school.
That's amazing. And how long is that? How long of a process?
It was 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there different nursing degrees that you can get, or different, I don't know,
Oh, yeah.
levels, I guess?
Well, what I had done was my nursing degree is an associate degree of nursing. It's a 2-year.
Mm-hmm.
And because I already had a 4-year degree in psychology, San Diego State wouldn't take me back to go from RN to bachelor level
Okay.
nurse. So, and I was already non-traditional age student, meaning I was a lot older.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So there's the 4-year Bachelor of Science in Nursing,
Yeah.
and they still are doing the 2-year associate degree, but there's usually an arrangement between the 2-year school and the 4-year school that if people do well, they can transfer into the program.
Yeah.
But the thing that stopped me was having a bachelor's degree. And San Diego State at least does not, as far as I know, grant second bachelor's degrees.
Oh,
Just
okay.
one to a customer.
One to a customer. So you're an RN then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that like walking into a classroom again after how many years of being...
Oh, yeah. It's strange. It's really strange because you are not thinking on that level. You're not thinking that kind of assessment or analysis. And so you have to retool, kind of refocus
Yeah.
and get your study skills going again.
And everybody around you is probably 20 years younger, or...
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. There were 2 other people in my class who were close to me in age, and one of them dropped out, and one of them finished and went to work. So,
Yeah. So did you end up using it and working as a nurse for a time?
I did. It took a while because I took some time off and hoping that things would ease up a little bit, but they didn't. And so I ended up with a part-time job in an orthopedic surgery practice.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular practice hired RNs.
Okay.
So it wasn't a job that used all the skills that I had learned, but it was just tough getting into a hospital
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seems though like, I mean, all the different experience that you have, you're learning so much in all these different areas. I don't know, it seems pretty cool to put yourself out there and try stuff like that. And,
Yeah, well, it was kind of like it's now or never,
yeah,
the moment is going to pass
yeah.
for sure.
What made you want to get your nursing degree?
I think it was something that I always wanted to do as far back as high school.
Okay.
My mother was a nurse.
Okay.
I have a cousin who is now retired and was a nurse for her career. And so it sort of ran in the family, I guess.
Yeah. Sounds like
Um,
it.
but yeah, that was what I wanted to do back then.
Nice.
And I remember a friend of mine, there was a school of nursing, there was a hospital school of nursing, which was not associated with any junior college or community college or university or anything like that. It was attached to the hospital itself.
Oh, okay.
And at the time in Santa Barbara, it was Knapp College of Nursing, and it was a residential program. So if you were married, it didn't fit.
What? So you had to live in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that kind of went by the boards, there was a shortage developing of nurses, and so the schools ramped up their game,
Mm-hmm.
and those small, I don't know, what would you call them? Proprietary schools almost.
Yeah.
There was one here in San Diego, I think, that was associated with Mercy Hospital way
Okay.
back in the day.
Is it kind of like a trade school popping up?
In a way,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny that you say that because we've talked about with other guests that there seems to always be a shift in
Mhm.
the workplace where the demand is and how it kind of there's effort to attract people,
Right,
and then when it gets saturated, then there's like basically all these barriers that go up,
right.
and so it's really a timing thing on some of that.
For sure. And you don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball, so you don't know when you get there what's it going to be like.
Right. And you're starting down that path years prior.
Right.
So you have no idea.
No.
I wonder if there's ways that, when you're considering something, if there's a way to kind of see the statistics on the movement towards a certain occupation.
I think there's a lag when you look at those resources. You can look online now,
Hmm.
which wasn't so much the case then. It was starting to happen.
Right.
But, and it would tell you which fields of work were hot, which ones were growing and what they were paying and what they were requiring in terms of education and experience.
Yeah.
But I think there was a lag in that because they weren't all that accurate, as I recall.
Yeah. I would imagine now, though, the information's, there's so much data,
Yeah,
and I think you could pretty well, if you wanted to look, you could
hmm
find out where the movement is in any given career and,
right.
kind of what the future need or demand is
Well,
going to
and
be.
people created their own jobs, within the field.
How so?
Like there was a lady out in our area. She was an RN at one of the hospitals locally. She worked in a neonatal intensive care unit. And she started a board and care for elderly, which was basically just buying a house
Yeah.
that had a lot of bedrooms. And
That's how she got started, huh?
that's how she got started.
Wow.
And that was where my stepdad ended up.
Wow. I did not know that she had started that.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of popped up for a while there where people were doing more and more of that.
Right. And there were some people who went into legal. That might have been a path that I could have pursued because
given your
they knew the
crossover.
legal terminology,
Okay.
and there were some things to do there. Some of my classmates became paramedics
Yeah.
because that was more open than nursing at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a big demand when I was trying out for the fire department. They were saying, hey, you got to go paramedic. That
Mhm.
was the big push.
Yeah.
And then even that ended up getting saturated. We had a bunch of paramedics, and it didn't set you apart anymore. Initially it did, but
Uh-huh.
um, what are some of the biggest obstacles you've had in your life?
Um, I think mostly they've been mostly self-limiting. Like my focus was my family,
Hmm.
and so if it came down to choosing between family and work, I was always going to choose family.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, moms have done all kinds of stuff over the years. They've become licensed daycare providers and,
Right.
done daycare for kids, or they've had home Tupperware parties or things like that. And I don't know. I think I heard that Tupperware just finally went out of business.
Really?
Yeah. Because they had to be agile and adjust to the times as well. So they, instead of having Tupperware entirely through home parties, they
Yeah.
started putting it in stores.
Yeah. I did not realize that they kind of restricted it to only home parties to
Yeah,
try and give that opportunity to stay-at-home moms to have those home shows.
right.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, now you buy it on Amazon.
right. Everything's on Amazon.
Yeah. It's kind of eliminated all of those home parties in a way.
It has. I mean, I think, you talk about obstacles. I think that my generation, or at least I feel for me, I lived on the cusp of all these changes
Right.
technologically, societally. I mean, when I was in high school and wanted to go to college, it was like, well, I was a Massachusetts girl. I was born back in the colonies, and Harvard at that time was men only.
Oh, really?
It wasn't until about 1968 that they started admitting women. I mean, there
Wow.
were women-only colleges,
Yeah.
and Harvard now is co-ed.
Right.
Um, and there were changes as far as social mores. What was, there were the dorms with the old dorm mother, and you had to be in at 10 o'clock and all that stuff. And,
Yeah.
you know, there was no cohabitation and none
Yeah.
of that stuff.
Yeah, there's no
So,
doubt a lot has changed and you've seen a lot of it.
yeah, yeah. And then the computer came along and revolutionized
Yeah.
a lot.
What does that look like when something like that first shows up? Is it kind of like a slow boil, or do you see it and you go, "Oh, this is a game changer"?
Um, I don't think I saw it as a game changer. I saw it as something that you could choose to pursue or not.
Mm-hmm.
But it really elbowed its way in to where you didn't have as much choice with that as you thought.
Yeah.
You had to get on board,
Right.
get on the train, or you didn't work, or,
Yeah.
um, even in medicine,
Right.
the electronic charting
Oh, right.
that came on.
Yeah.
And I was there when one of the hospitals where I was doing clinicals had just brought their computer charting system online right during flu season. It
Oh
was
boy.
it was not an inspired choice
Yeah.
of
So
timing.
before that, it was all just like the old charts, like you see.
Paper charting.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing. I can imagine that had to have had so many, or I guess it gave the opportunity for a lot of error. If it's all just, or do you think it has just as much as a computer?
Well, for a lot of things, like when I left to go back to school
Hmm.
after Dad finished his school and went to work, when I left the law firm, they were just changing over to getting their own computer systems for their own accounting purposes. And, that was back in the day when you were doing punch cards and the
Yeah.
computer filled up a whole room.
Right.
That was way before PCs.
Yeah.
And I think there were a lot of changes like that. And so what happened was we ended up doing things double.
Yeah.
You ended up doing the paper version, but then you also ended up inputting stuff into the computer, but you had to do both
Double
until
entry.
until you could get to the point where you could just have the computer take over.
Gotcha.
And I think this medical charting thing was like that too,
Mm-hmm.
and so that change just progressed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about, operating, you know, in the 50s and 60s and just watching all this change happen. I mean, even in my lifetime, just how much more dependent we are. And, we've talked about like smartphones and just the speed of everything. And
Oh, yeah, incredible. I
yeah,
mean, who would think? Now, if I go out the door without my smartphone, I'm like
yeah,
lost. I'm disconnected
right.
from life.
There's a panic feel. You're like, oh
Yeah.
no. Um, so, as far as challenges in raising a young family, really being in charge of managing a household, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
I think as a kid, you don't really recognize it, and you look back and you're like, oh, that was chaos.
Right. Yeah,
And
there was a lot of
a
chaos.
lot of chaos. Um, I, I mean, is that I look at it now and I go, hey, it's such an amazing thing to have the ability to focus on just raising a family.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, is that something that you kind of would advise other people with families? Is like there is a benefit to that focus, right?
Oh, absolutely. I really feel bad when your generation of people can't do that, can't focus on just
Yeah.
raising the family. I mean, one of the things that Dad and I decided was that we were going to raise our kids, and I hated to see things develop to where it pulled moms out of the home because they needed to work,
Yeah.
and it pulled them away from their children. It created extra expenses because
Right.
they had to pay for childcare.
Well, that's what everybody says now is you can't possibly live in San Diego on a single income. That's what they
No.
say. But I also feel like there was a little bit of an attack on the validity of a mom's job.
Oh, absolutely. There was always that, and it sort of reversed itself at some point in time because we were all moms staying at home, being full-time moms, and so we were. I hope I wasn't, but I felt sorry for moms who had to work
Yeah.
because it shifted a lot onto the moms who didn't work. We were the room moms,
Right.
and we were driving the carpools, and we were doing a lot of stuff that the working moms couldn't do. And yet at the same time, you were kind of like, well, you should do whatever you can so that you can stay in that full-time mom mode. But it was a real sacrifice,
Yeah.
income-wise and time-wise. And then at some point it reversed, and the working moms were like, well, you're just a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
What do you do all day? Well, let me tell you.
Right. Right. Well, that was what was interesting to me to see with my generation is there was not a willingness to make that sacrifice, like you're saying,
Hmm.
to have a different, I guess, quality of life or level of living. Everybody had to have the
Right.
latest and greatest, and I feel like that ties into all kinds of other things with marketing and just the how we are pushed to buy, and so we kind of in a way shackle ourselves to this, and this belief comes out of it where we go, we have to. There's no other choice,
Right.
um,
Right.
and I think people didn't really fully appreciate the sacrifices and
No,
also the level of work because it was an honorable thing to be
for
a
sure.
homemaker.
Yes.
And really we need that, and now it's been kind of frowned upon almost, like
Yeah.
you were saying.
Yeah.
Like,
It
what do you
just
do?
turned around.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel bad for the parents who miss out on that, because we used to have those really clearly defined roles. Dad was a breadwinner, mom was the homemaker. We used to say dad made the living and mom made the life worth living,
Yeah.
you know, tongue in cheek maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the kids, I mean, people used to say things to me like, well, your kids are whatever it was, you must have spent a lot of time with them. And I was like, well, Luke, he was our third one, he had to stand in line for attention, wasn't like if you were a full-time mom, you were spoiling your kids, you know. No, no, that's not what's happening.
Right.
You know, there were a lot of things that we didn't do that other families could.
Yeah.
But we always managed to like take a vacation every year.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about learning to ski and, being able to do that as a family. And I
Yeah.
know later on, one of the trips you had a ski injury. I wasn't on that trip.
No, no, you were this guy who's our producer today was just about a couple of weeks from being born.
Okay, so that's why I didn't make that one.
Yep.
Um, what happened on that? You broke your leg pretty good. Was it your hip or your leg?
No, it was actually my tibial plateau where my lower leg and my upper leg articulate together at the knee, and my tibia also was fractured. So
Oh man.
I caught an edge and went down, and they were like, "Well, you're going to need surgery for that." And I thought, "No, really?"
Oh man. So there's been some adversity or whatever you want to call it. Um, in your life, kind of in the later half, as
Mm,
far as health. Um, can you share a little bit about like kind of your experience with, you've had 3 rounds with cancer,
right,
you've had multiple surgeries on leg injuries, and
right. Yeah, the leg injury was really the first thing that was kind of a game changer.
mm-hmm,
Although earlier on, I had a health diagnosis that was like something that had to be paid attention to. It wasn't going to be life threatening, but it was going to be life changing. You're going to have to change some of the things that you're doing.
yeah,
And then right about the time I was supposed to start nursing school, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
mm-hmm, for the first
And
time.
yep, the first time. And ended up having surgery. And supposedly that took care of everything. And then 7 years later, it came back again. And I guess that's kind of typical of cancer, is that it can do that. And so I had surgery again. And they wanted me to do some other things, and I said, well, no, I don't think so, because I was getting mixed messages from the medical community on that. So then another 7 years, and back in 2020, right in the middle of COVID,
Yeah.
I was diagnosed again, only this time with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer.
Man.
So that means that it's like a chronic disease. It can be managed, but it can never be eradicated,
Mm-hmm.
can never be cured,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah. So that's coming up on
4 years this month.
4 years
Yeah.
from that. I mean, that was scary news.
It was scary news. I mean, it's funny about those things. Sometimes you don't realize how serious it is.
Yeah.
And then you end up in the hospital,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I guess I was close to being in very bad shape that time. One of the doctors told me, he said, it was almost emergency, like get to the hospital and, do something.
Yeah.
And that time I ended up in the cardiac ICU for about 5 days because I had a buildup of fluid around my heart,
Yeah.
which was part of the process of the cancer.
Right. During COVID, no less.
During COVID.
So nobody could be with you.
No, nobody. No family could visit. Your dad couldn't visit.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Just sitting alone in a hospital dealing with these people and
Right.
all of this kind of unknown. And, during that time, it just seemed like a lot of people shared that experience where something would happen and you just couldn't have that support. That was such a hard thing about that.
Yeah, it was a hard thing, and I don't think it was a necessary thing,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. It was really important to the person who was trying to heal
Yeah.
to have that support,
Right.
and it was taken away.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get that news, and I know that there was some, there's some treatments that they say, hey, we can try and we can,
Hmm.
what would you call it? Manage it? Is that,
Yeah, they
and,
manage it.
and you've basically been, I say, I don't know if I have this right, but like a poster child for those management techniques because they've done everything they said they were supposed to do.
Right. Well, basically, all they have in their toolbox is surgery, medication, and radiation.
Yep.
Those are the things.
Yep.
And at one point or another, I've had them all.
Right.
I
Well,
haven't had to do chemo,
okay.
so there have been some um, advancements in treatment, so that chemo is more of a big gun.
Yeah.
For it has its place, but
Right. Yeah. I know that you've been fighting, and this is your third round with it, and
hmm
I don't know if you ever get desensitized and just get to the point where you're like, I mean, each time are you just as shocked, or
um, I don't. I think I was shocked at the most recent
okay,
because it was the most serious.
yeah,
It wasn't just like, well, there's a mass here and we can remove that, with surgery
yeah,
and do some treatments. So it's a much higher level of monitoring now
mm-hmm,
with medication, and you have to follow on the medication and do labs frequently, and then do scans every regular interval,
yeah,
and just it's kind of like sometimes you wonder when the other shoe is going to fall, like
yeah,
will it stop working, that kind of thing,
sure.
you know.
Do you get to a point where you're kind of numb to that though, or is that still always in the back of your mind?
I think it's always in the back of your mind, but on the other hand, you can forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
You can, and certainly the people around you do.
Yeah,
They look at you and they don't see anything wrong. So, it's like, oh, well, you got through that. You're over it now. And I find myself explaining, well, not really.
hmm,
You know, um, yeah, I got through that part of it, sort of, but there's still more. It's still there.
yeah.
I'm still,
That's interesting the way you kind of phrase that about like the people around you forget because you you've had some scares and some really serious results,
hmm
and but you've also been able to put on a brave face. You've always been such a strong person. You're not a complainer, and you've been traveling and just still trying to live life,
right.
which is amazing. But yeah, I guess it is kind of hard sometimes to, for people who aren't living it day to day,
Right.
to fully comprehend what it is that you go through on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think I get kind of burned out,
Yeah.
where I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to go to the doctor's visits and, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a lot of work.
yeah, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is my life now, right?
Well, imagine it's mentally draining, emotionally draining,
Yeah, it can be.
like preparing yourself every time you got to go in and hear, okay, what's new this time?
Right. Well, and it's the scan thing that gets people. They call it scanxiety.
Oh.
Where you're coming up on a scan and you go, well, what's the scan going to show? Is it going to be clear or not?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's kind of like someone different reads the scan every time and they say something different, like,
Yeah.
well, we see this or we see that, and they never mention it again. So uh, it's kind of confusing sometimes.
Yeah. I could see that being exhausting too, and just like I'll skip this one. I mean,
Yeah.
it just seems like this new pattern that's not all that. Um, I don't know. It just seems like it's not. Like you're saying, you're kind of just waiting for the shoe to drop.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost what it feels like at times when you have these reoccurring. Um, I mean, what would you just say to somebody who's finding out for their first time that they're going through this?
Boy, that's a really tough question. I mean, I think you have to decide. One of the questions that was important to me was, do you want to live?
Yeah,
You know, and by living, it means not just surviving. You know, do you still want to be able to maybe travel or, do normal things?
hmm,
What is it? What do you live for?
yeah,
And it's like, well, yeah, family has always been important to me.
hmm,
I'm not ready to, leave my family behind.
right,
Um, and still wanting to be there for those young grandchildren,
yeah,
that are just starting to live their life.
right,
Um, and so, it was kind of hard for me to answer that question. Um, and you revisit it every once in a while. Do I still feel that way? Do I still want to live life?
yeah,
And what does that look like?
yeah,
And so, um, oddly, since the election that we've just had,
mm-hmm,
it's been a little easier to answer that in the affirmative.
hmm,
Like, yeah, because I don't think anybody's going to come and, make it hard to live life. What are they going to enact, or what laws are they going to pass, or,
yeah,
how are they going to affect people?
yeah,
And it's such a small group of people that we call our government,
yeah,
and yet they have such an enormous effect on people's lives.
right. Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I do feel like in general, all walks of life, I've just heard people say that they're a little more enthusiastic,
Hmm.
and I mean that is a nice feeling. It's funny how just I guess the feel in the air if it's a little lighter and your life you breathe a little easier.
Right.
But in terms of uh, just your overall battle with it, where do you pull your hope from?
Well, it's always been my faith
Yeah,
in our Lord Jesus Christ. And, it's like I always say, the verse says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So, you're going to a good place,
yeah,
and yet somehow not eager to go.
yeah,
I don't know how you resolve that tension of, because you would think, well, hell, heaven,
yeah,
I get to go,
right,
and I get to leave all this other stuff, this earthly stuff behind. But there's people that you still want to hang out with, and people you want to spend time with, and
yeah,
so I don't know why it's not easy to just embrace that and say, well, I know where I'm going, so the
yeah,
next time it comes back, I'm out of here, or whatever.
yeah. The human will to live,
Is amazing.
it is. And thank God we have that because it's a pretty dark place to just throw in the towel.
Right.
And I'm thankful you're not there, and I'm glad you've been fighting as hard as you have been for the last 4 years. And every moment, every time, as you mentioned, with the grandkids and getting to know them, every memory built is precious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it's a good reminder. Tomorrow's not promised,
Right.
and we can't control a lot of things,
No.
or really anything. I think control's kind of I don't know, it's kind of a an illusion in a way.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
You can try and feel like you are, but it's not real. 'Cause
No.
it's, yeah, it's only for a time that you can even have that. Um, well, yeah, I look at your life and how hard of a worker you are and all that you've done and very sacrificially and always with just a great attitude. And I think for me, um, that has been the biggest thing you've modeled is just to, it's almost like suffering and humility, and just like being able to still be positive, not let your circumstances define you.
Mm.
And I think that's just part of who you are. Maybe that's your upbringing. That's all the story we just heard. That's amazing. Um,
Well, I appreciate that because from where I sit, a lot of the time, I don't feel like, I've accomplished a lot.
mm,
It's just, um, could I have done more or better?
mm,
I look at my kids and I'm so proud of you guys because I think you have just taken things to the next level with your families and your lives and it's just really satisfying to see.
yeah. It's a big life, but there's, of course, I mean, when we get to the end, I don't know that we'll ever say, "Okay, we're done." I don't think we're ever supposed to be done.
No, I don't think we're wired that way.
No.
No.
Which is part of what makes it so fun is like, the unfinished, feeling can kind of drive you nuts, but I think it's also what, propels us forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I think it's really, really exciting what God's done in, you know, having all the medications work and all the treatment, and have you be able to come in here today and tell us, just a brief summary of your life and what it's been like as a young girl growing up in the 50s
Yeah.
and just your journey through being an incredible mom, raising a family, and just all the adventure and all of the obstacles that you've overcome, and with grace and a smile. And so, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today. And
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
so, Sarah, in case I'm forgetting anything, is there anything you want?
Yeah. What did you want to be when you were growing up? Did you
What what did I want to be when I grew up? I knew I didn't want to be a secretary, and then I ended up being one. I did want to be a nurse, and when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot open to women at that time. There were real traditional things. You could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, be a secretary, be a mom. Those really traditional
Yeah.
roles for women. And it was really just when we went back to a high school reunion, there were some of the ladies in our graduating class who had become like, one was a PhD psychologist, and I was like, wow, I never would have thought of that at that time.
Yeah.
Um, and I haven't kept track, so I don't know, what a lot of those people have ended up doing. But, it seemed like there was a group that stayed local, it stayed around, and then there was a group that flew. They really left town and, ended up doing things, and we lost track.
Yeah.
So, but as far as what I wanted to be, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. One of the things though in life is you can have this idea, and I just feel like it just meanders. And, looking back, usually there's some connecting dots at how you got there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you could have planned it that way usually.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of beautiful in that way, though, is like just the way it comes together.
Right.
Obviously, you have to participate and you have to move and try. And I mean, look at all the things that you did, all the different degrees and jobs and, raising a family. And I mean, you did a lot.
Yeah, I joke with Dad. I say I have so many associate degrees. If I had spent that time, progressing forward, I should have like a graduate degree by now,
Yeah,
you know.
no kidding.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've always thought that life is all about uh, transformations or, changes like reinventions, and you got to keep up with the technology, and that guides you in a certain way. And who knows? Maybe I could have written the great American novel or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's no shortage to all the things that we'll have wanted to have done, but you can only do so much,
Yeah.
and what you've done is great. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mom. All right. Oh, what?
I have 2 more.
You have 2 more. Okay. All right. Did you text them to me? I don't.
Oh, I just texted. Well, what are you most proud of? I know that's hard to like put 76 years of your life and answer it in one question, but like, what do you look back on and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
really proud of that.
Yeah. What are you most proud of?
Other than your firstborn daughter.
No, I am really proud of my family and the people that they have turned out to be. I mean, it's a constant source of, gratification, to see these people and how they've developed, sometimes I think in spite of me, to become just really great people. They like each other. They like to hang out with each other. I like to hang out with them. They're my favorite people.
No, I
And
think it's because of you. I mean, I think that's the thing is when I have heard somebody say, we're all standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us, and that's our parents.
yeah,
For better or worse, they gave you. In my case, I feel better, not worse, but like even people who have had really challenging upbringings and difficult home life, they're standing on those mistakes so they know not to make them.
right.
So we get to, take and improve. And I think that's the goal is, if we can all acknowledge where we came from and that we are who we are because of the environment you created, because you allowed us to swing for the fences and be bold and have the support. So yeah, we're standing on the shoulders of our parents. So what is something that you're still learning?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so much, really. I'm still learning about things that keep us healthy. That, if I had known then what I know now, it might
Yeah.
have made a difference.
Yeah.
For me and for other people. It seems like the thing that I used my nursing education most for was family members. Like I was able to take care of Grandma during her end of life time, and I've been able to be a help to Dad in some of his health challenges as well. So there's the whole health field, and I'm still learning tons about that.
Yeah.
And then spiritually, I'm still learning and, wanting to come to a better knowledge of God and wanting to come to stronger faith. And that's a real MMA wrestling match
Yeah.
sometimes, to get that. But yeah, still learning about that.
That's huge. I mean, health is so critical, right? It's kind of all we have, right? And to continue to learn, and it's finally coming to the forefront and being I shouldn't say finally, it's always been there, but it seems like it's had an agenda. And now I think with the availability of all the information
Oh, yeah.
and the advancement in being able to study nutrition.
Hmm.
People are really starting to see, that we've been sick as a country and we need to take care of ourselves. You get one body.
Right.
And so I think that's awesome I've looked at all that you've done with, your fight against cancer, and a big part of it has been how you approach your nutrition, your diet, which is
Right.
amazing. And yeah, that idea that God's never done with us. So I hope to be in that same place, learning forever and pursuing closeness. And so that's really cool. To not just throw your hands up and say, wait, I'm all done.
Yeah. No, I don't want to go out, as a lump in a chair.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about it is, I want to be able to do stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're not in any jeopardy of that now. I mean, you are, you're busy with the family. You show up to all the events and, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're tired and I'm sure it's not always easy, but
Yeah.
you're
No.
doing it.
That's our job as grandparents, all those Christmas programs that we got you guys through when you were growing up, and now we're going because, we got
So
it.
you're saying it doesn't end? I got my kids out of school and I'm going to have to go to grandkids things now?
Oh, yeah, it's going to come.
Oh, man. I might be that grandpa that says, nope, not doing it. No, but it's your job.
Yeah.
So you do
I
it.
mean, yeah, we show up for the family.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
I mean, yeah, they were, they're important,
Yeah.
and they give us meaning and purpose.
Yep. Cool. Well, super fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
you're welcome.
we'll wrap it there.